Hello, everybody. Come on in. It's Friday. It's the Democracy Stupid. And I'm joined today by David Smith, who is the Guardian's Washington bureau chief. David, thank you for joining me. I love the Guardian.
Oh, thank you. Great to be here.
No, I mean, fearless, fact-based reporting that you give away for free. And by the way, if you're listening, go on the Guardian site, read their stuff, and then make a contribution because they don't require it, but it costs money to do this kind of reporting. David, you are such an interesting guy. You've reported from all over the world. You've had a pretty interesting career. And I sort of want to ask: is covering Trump too just more of the same, or are there things that are actually different than you've encountered all over the world?
Yeah, it's a bit of both. Some would say I had ideal preparation for covering the Trump era because prior to this, I was the Africa correspondent. So I got my fair share of dictatorships and authoritarian regimes and demagogues and populists and countries with fears of civil war. And people said to me, congratulations, you're moving to America. It's an important job, but it's going to be pretty boring compared to Africa. And that was certainly not the case as I arrived in 2015, just as the Trump phenomenon was taking off. And it's obviously been this very wild ride since. And there are certain echoes for me of South Africa, for example, in terms of the issue of race relations being very central, and just worries about the fragility of democracy. But of course, Trump is also unique in many respects. When I think of the first term, I think about that social media presidency, the way a single tweet could upend your weekend as a journalist, as you were leaping on whatever he'd said that could move markets and potentially trigger wars. And now, I mean, to me, the second term, on a day-to-day level as a reporter, particularly if you're on White House pool duty or covering what's on the agenda, it's actually more similar than you would think, and even sort of has certain similarities with covering the Biden administration. But on another level, I think this one has been very different. To me, the biggest two surprises have been Trump's obsession with legacy in Washington, building monuments, the Triumphal Arch, the White House ballroom, the debacle of the reflecting pool, which is a fabulous metaphor for the entire presidency. And then secondly, the big surprise has been just the obsession with foreign policy, whether it's threatening to annex Greenland or says he wants Canada. And most dangerously this year, obviously, the invasions of Venezuela and Iran. That does feel a bit different from anything I was covering before.
Yeah, a friendly amendment. It feels less foreign policy than just foreign meddling. There's not really a policy piece to go around it. We asked, like, why are you doing it? Well, I don't know. It's there. So
that's right. Yeah. Policy is too kind a word. Yes, it does suggest a sort of a coherence and a set of principles set down somewhere where, as ever with Trump, it feels very improvisational. And you do question now in Iran, is there any long-term strategy at all? Or is it just a very sort of instinctive, reactionary, set of events to whatever's happening right now?
Yeah, it's a mess. I want to, before I get into these, I was interested, you like the first term, you talked about how posting on social media could upend everything. It's my sense that now he's lost so much credibility all over the world that people take what he says and go like, nah. I mean, he went to to Europe at this time and said, I want Greenland again. And they said, yeah, no, this time you're going to actually do something for Ukraine. And he said, okay. I mean, it's like his bluster doesn't mean anything to people anymore. He said, we're going to take Iran and put them back in the Stone Ages. And they said, yeah, no, you're not. And here at home, I mean, last night he gave a national speech saying that no one should believe American elections. And I think the only 4 people that saw it were reporters who have to report on it, and nobody cares anymore. I mean, do you get the sense that he's lost his mojo and that it's kind of humiliating and he feels that?
Yeah, I think all that's right. For journalists, we've often wrestled with this dilemma. On the one hand, he's the president of the United States. What he says.
David, I need to interrupt you for 1 second. Your audio has gone.
Yeah, I'm hearing that as well. Do you want me to call back on a different device, which I think might be better?
Yep. All right. So everybody, this is the thing about doing events live. We're going to take a second here while I filibuster, an old famous feat in Washington, while I talk for a bit, while David comes back in and we get a little better audio. We were, talking about that speech last night that Trump gave. That I don't know if anybody. I mean, write something in the chat if you saw it, or hit those hearts if you saw it. I don't think anybody did. I mean, the numbers look terrible. Or the only people who carried it were Fox and CBS, and that's Barry Weiss's CBS and Fox's Fox. But even Fox didn't run it this morning and didn't talk about it on Fox and Friends this morning. I just, the man thought he was going to straddle the world. Now he can't even have a primetime press conference about election meddling. I think it's pretty interesting. Sean is asking if you want to see a cut from that speech. And I'm torn. I don't think we need to, because you know what he did. He blathered on about, the elections being stolen. He wants to say he won in 2020 when he lost by 7 million votes and he lost the Electoral College. And he can't handle it. David, are you back?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Great. I think this camera angle is not quite as good, but the sound and video are better. And shall I just go back to what I was saying?
Yes.
Which was, yes, I think as journalists, we wrestle with that dilemma with Trump from the beginning about, on the one hand, he's the president. We should be covering what he says. It's important. And then on the other, we know there will be some blatant lies and distortions. And of course, in his first term, the Washington Post kept count, and I think it was about 30,000 false and misleading statements that he made. And yeah, I think I agree with you that the pendulum has swung during that time. First couple of years, everything he said and tweeted was transcribed by sort of media stenographers in a way, including me, I admit. And then you become more and more skeptical, and particularly something like January the 6th and the build up to that 2020 election, it just would not be appropriate to write a simple news story saying Donald Trump says he won the election. And you've got to put in the caveats about the false claims. And now in the second term, I think, a couple of things have happened. He's not really tweeting much on X anymore. He's on Truth Social. And that marginalizes him a bit. But yes, even in his public remarks, as you say, at NATO or to the press, they do get covered in some quarters. Certainly Fox News still takes a lot. MS Now, less so. Last night was a fascinating debate for the networks. Should they cover this primetime address? I think most of them made the right decision in not covering it. And MS Now showed some of it and then cut away with fact checks and so on. And yes, world leaders now have learned to be skeptical. And if you just look at the Iran war alone, remember somebody did a count. It was about 38 or 39 times he said it's going to end tomorrow, or we've got peace, or as a ceasefire.
And the strait is open.
Yeah, exactly. And then that was undercut by events. So everybody is learning that it's not really worth the paper it's written on.
So, I mean, while that speaks a lot to the man personally, it does damage to the United States around the world when our president, when people listen to our president and yawn, and and they go like, okay, that's just him being him. It doesn't matter. I mean, the credibility of our soft power or hard power, all of it depends on whether we can be believed when we speak. And I think around the world now, that's lost. It'll take a long time to rebuild.
I think so. Yeah, some really lasting damage there. And of course, we've been through this once with the first Trump term, and then Joe Biden came in and was fond of talking about his conversations about trying to rebuild that trust and being quizzed by foreign leaders. How do we know you're here to stay? How do we know Trump is not coming back? And then, of course, that is precisely what did happen. And second time around, Trump is arguably even worse and less trustworthy. And of course, it leaves international partners saying we just can't trust the US anymore. Even after Trump, who knows who's going to be there. And certainly I hear that European leaders and others are working on alternative future scenarios, which are far less dependent on the US, whether it's their own defense pacts or security agreements, or building entire structures that either exclude the US or certainly far less dependent. And we've heard those speeches from people like Mark Carney talking about a rupture in the rules-based order, and some of the things Emmanuel Macron has said.
Mark Carney doesn't really count as Europe. This is Canada, but
indeed,
yeah,
yes,
but he's saying, in effect, it doesn't matter that we have the longest border in the world with the United States. We can't trust what they're doing, and we need to look elsewhere. And I hear the same things you're hearing. Kind of heartbreaking, because I think it's not. I understand why the rest of the world's doing it. I don't think it's good for us in the United States. And long term, the partnership was good for everyone. But Europe has to, on energy, on defense, on economics. I mean, you have a sanctions mad president that does not help global economics or build trust.
No, that's right. And I think we're probably underreporting and not entirely grasping how the Iran war alone is wreaking havoc around the world, and energy markets and a lot of economies are suffering. Whatever is happening in the US with gas prices and the cost of fertilizer, I know there are many countries suffering far worse. So they blame Trump for that. I suppose if I was going to play devil's advocate here, just to try and put the other side, why not? I would say, when I talk to British officials, for example, and others, they say, beneath what's happening at that surface level with the leaders, actually, a lot of it is still business as usual in terms of intelligence sharing and security cooperation. And that tends to go on irrespective of whoever the president and prime minister are. There are some deep fundamentals there. And, if there's one lesson from the last decade, it's just how quickly things can change. So while I fear very lasting long-term damage has been done, I would not entirely rule out also the possibility of, the next US president trying to rebuild these partnerships, and within a couple of years, people being surprised, hey, look how quickly things got back to normal. I mean, I think there's some odds against that, but I'm also aware things can be much more sort of fluid and fast than we often think they are.
Well, David, I'm an optimist, and I think this era will come to an end, and I think Americans will not lose our democracy. But the threat is so real that, and the institutions in our country have failed, not the courts so much, but the law firms, the universities, big businesses. When you just the list of people who failed us in this moment, it's going to fall to the American people to save their democracy. And if we do, I think that's an inspiring lesson for everybody, because this was a big threat we will have avoided.
Yeah, one of the biggest ever, certainly many would say, since the Civil War. And I think that has been fascinating. In the first 6 months or year of the Trump presidency, he really knocked a lot of people back on their heels, and there was tremendous capitulation, as you say, of law firms, universities, some media organizations, and others. They're a real sort of shock and awe approach. But what's interesting is, I think more recently, you have seen some of these institutions pushing back more, discovering that courage is contagious, discovering that when you don't give in to the bully, he actually stops coming back for more. And I sense maybe a little bit of tide turning, and I think it's been great to see media organizations such as the New York Times and Wall Street Journal standing their ground on certain things, and others also defying Trump and making it clear he's not quite as powerful as he seemed. And yes, ultimately, all these things come down to the people, the citizens, and hopefully they will, ride out the storm. My my gut feeling is that democracy will survive, but yes, it's a close run thing.
It is a close run thing. And on the topic of journalism a little bit, and the pushback from the New York Times and Washington Post, that recently the FBI showed up at reporters' homes. And they did that because, let's see, the reporters did their job. Right. And the New York Times is fighting that, and the subpoenas might get quashed because the courts are not fully corrupt. And when there are corrupt subpoenas, they have been quashed by courts in this. I see that, and I see the way the press is treated in Washington. And I have to ask you, because this is a august body you're part of, the Washington Press Corps, the White House Press Corps, for God's sakes, what is going on with that? You're going to have a party with Donald Trump in a week, in a ballroom? Like, why? How is that justifiable right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll just very quickly add to what we were talking about. I look at the No Kings protests as signs of people power as well, and that's been important. Yeah, the White House Correspondents Association dinner, as you say, reorganized after that last one with the gunman who apparently was trying to assassinate Trump and everybody diving under tables. I think, yeah, there's certainly, well, I'll tell you what our approach to the original dinner was, because I was one of those people diving under tables, was, we attend every year. It's an association event. We were aware of the politics, so we had 5 reporters covering that event as a news event. Here's Trump speaking for the first time as president there. And then we had 5 press freedom advocates, people like PEN America and Reporters Without Borders, bringing it along to really take a stand, make a point. Yeah, I think now the rearranged dinner, which I'm not going to for various reasons, but yeah, it's definitely not a great look from the outside, whining and dining with this demagogue who attacks the media. But I think at least one of the counter arguments is that this is an annual dinner for the White House correspondents that's happened every year for about 100 years. Its primary focus is actually about the First Amendment and press freedom. It awards scholarships to young journalists to give them a start in their career. Other honorary awards for people. There's an entertainer. The speech by the president has always been one component of it, and that that's been true in the past. It's not a White House event. It's not all about him. So I can see the arguments for it happening, and there's certainly a debate about should this particular president be invited, but that's what the association has decided to do.
Well, someone once said about George Gershwin, the great composer, an evening with George is an evening about George. So it's very hard to have an evening with Donald Trump and have it not be about him.
He is the master of grabbing attention, isn't he? Yes.
He is, yeah. All right. Speaking of which, so what do you hear from people in DC that you talk to about, like a range of issues? I mean, what do people really say when you ask them? Like Pete Hegseth wants to test everybody in the military for testosterone. And I haven't heard the Republicans pound the table and say, we're not going to fund that. That's crazy. What do people say when they're not lying to the camera?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's bewilderment about all of this. Just kind of lots of face plants, head slapping foreheads, kind of jaws dropping. Obviously, the funny thing about being in Washington is that we have a Trump presidency and all the acolytes around that. But otherwise, the District of Columbia is just about the most democratic place in the entire country. I think Kamala Harris got about 94% here or something. So, Trump is a little red dot surrounded by blue. And you don't have to look far for people protesting in that No King spirit. And yeah, they are horrified by what he's doing, and it's kind of up close and personal here, of course, because the National Guard are deployed everywhere. On the streets. Yeah. It was interesting, the July the 4th celebration, because some Trump supporters did come to town then, and the Great American State Fair had been poorly attended, and then Trump gave a speech which I think most Washingtonians kind of disdained and were not going to be at. It was Trump supporters from the outside, but Yeah, I think, Democrats are pretty public with their mortification about all of this and critique of the Trump presidency as a genuine threat to democracy, and every day raises new questions about even his mental capacity at 80 years old. But there are plenty of Republicans here as well who on camera will never say it because there are such dire penalties. Trump will primary you, or you'll face physical threats and verbal abuse. But behind the scenes, they have contempt for him. And right now they're tearing their hair out because, if somebody wanted to sabotage Republicans in the midterms, what would they actually do differently from Trump?
I agree with that.
Everything he says and does, and the folly of this Iran war, it's really hurting his own party. And I think on Capitol Hill, they're very aware of that, but they're not allowed to say so publicly.
Well, one of his biggest advocates in the Senate was, of course, Lindsey Graham. And you have been talking to people since he passed. What's the impact on the Senate, on the executive branch, Senate relations, without a guy like Lindsey Graham, who I find very little appealing about him, except that he was very good at making those personal connections with people and with the president and other senators. Now, what happens in his absence?
Yeah, and when you think there's 100 senators, but few who rival him for name recognition and just being a colorful, larger-than-life character, and I'm struck by how many plays or satirical TV shows have always enjoyed making fun of him as a Southern dandy out of a Tennessee Williams play. And there was something important about that in terms of, as you say, his personal relations and soft power. And Trump described him as a member of my family. They seem to be close and played a lot of golf together. So I think that will be a setback for the Senate, which already has problems with Trump. And I don't think Trump and John Thune are great friends. And again, the Senate is worried about Trump being obsessed with the Save America Act. It's worried about what it's doing to its electoral chances. Graham was always a useful interlocutor, and even Democrats felt that. And Adam Schiff, Democrat from California, over the weekend was saying Lindsey Graham was a Trump whisperer. So if you wanted to get an issue to the White House or understand what Trump was thinking, Graham was a great person to check in with, and he would at least talk to Democrats. And I think that goes for the international scene as well that we were talking about. That presidents and prime ministers valued Graham as a conduit to the Oval Office if they wanted to bring something to Trump. And just to give one example, I wonder what the death of Lindsey Graham means for the future of Ukraine.
He was there right before he died.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes, that's right. For the 10th time since the war began. And the last time I met Lindsey Graham, he was talking about how he was still pushing that issue with Trump, along with pushing the Iran issue, perhaps less happily. But without that voice in the room, will Trump become even less engaged with Ukraine and even more sympathetic to Putin? We shall see. I don't, in terms of the balance of power in the Senate, Graham has already been replaced by his sister. I assume she'll be a reliable vote. So I don't think it changes much there. Although, of course, we also have the big health mystery around Mitch McConnell. But is
there any, like, what are people there saying about that? In the rest of the country, you just read there's a big health mystery. Like, anybody you talk to on Capitol Hill have any other insight?
Well, I know no more than what we saw about a week ago, where suddenly Republican leaders all came forward with these similar stories about, I spoke to Mitch McConnell for 20 minutes and we discussed this and that issue.
About 11 hours of 20-minute conversations.
That's right. Yeah.
And he had a newspaper, the kind of proof of life thing you do, because
exactly. He was there with the sports section from the Washington Post over the weekend. That seemed to kind of quell some of the rumors for a bit, maybe, although there were still conspiracy theories around. And we still don't know when he might be coming back to the Senate. Certainly, I talked to Steve Bannon former advisor to Trump, leading podcast about all this, and he was espousing the MAGA view that there is something conspiratorial going on here, that his argument is Mitch McConnell is still the most powerful man in the Senate. He's still the one who pulls the strings, even though he's not technically leader anymore. And therefore, there's a cover-up around his health because the Senate don't want to show weakness to Trump. They think if McConnell is out of the way, Trump will bully senators even more over the Save America Act and other things. And so they want to maintain this illusion that McConnell is still there, knows what he's doing.
Seriously, when you hear a guy say that, and you know he has a big platform, Bannon, and he starts talking like this, does that strike you as just crazy?
I mean, that particular point, I questioned it, but when I did some other interviews, one or two of them expressed some sympathy with that view, which one never wants to both sides of these things. But I think one of them said to me, well, actually, Nancy Pelosi still has huge influence over the Democrats, even though she's not leader anymore. Certainly, the broader point about
respect and influence a little bit, but the man is ill, and I mean, he had again, like Lindsey, a guy I don't agree with about almost anything, but I don't wish him ill. He had polio as a kid, and now that always complicates illness late in life. Anybody else in that situation, it'll be months before they can go back to work, if they can go back to work. And I don't think that's a cover-up. That's just a fact. Yep,
that's right. I think it's obviously also reflective of an age of conspiracy theories, which Trump has done much to stoke, whether it's Pizzagate or the Epstein files, and also comes in a context of the Joe Biden health saga and was there a White House cover up there. Now similar concerns about Donald Trump's own health. So
that's why good reporting is so important.
Yep.
I mean, what are people saying about the testimony that we heard this week from Todd Blanche? I mean, in particular for me, when he said about the January 6thers, right? He was asked, do you think it's wrong? Do you think it's just that they were all pardoned? And his answer was, basically, justice is irrelevant. Donald Trump pardoned them, and that's the only thing that matters. He had the right to do it. And he wants to run the Justice Department. Did things like that, and there was a bunch of examples like that in his testimony. Does that register to people in Washington, or are they just focused on can he win, can he lose?
Yeah, and Blanche wasn't making much secret of the fact that he was Trump's personal lawyer and probably still would be. I think again, it's a sort of mixed answer. It certainly registers with some people who are following this closely, and Democrats seize on it and go on the shows and talk about it and put out statements. How much of that matters? How many people are watching them on MS Now anymore? I don't know. But I say it's mixed because I think on the other hand, sadly, we have seen a shifting of the Overton window with Trump, and what once would have been outrageous and dominating headlines for days is now just a sort of collective shrug of, well, of course, that's how it is. We expect Trump's people to be lackeys and loyalists and sycophants. And it's a shame that numbness has crept in, that, what would have been utterly shocking a year ago now is just kind of, well, that's the way it is.
Yeah. Well, I want to shift the window the other direction. So I say crazy things, David, like Mar-a-Lago should be the next Smithsonian Museum, and it should be a museum of American fascism. And you know what? There's plenty of examples like that. Robert E. Lee's home is, after all, right? Or Robben Island is in South Africa. It's not in anything in Berlin. I mean, this is not unique. And I hope he builds the arch. I hope he builds it, because we will clear our national debt by giving everybody in America for $10 the right to take a swing with a sledgehammer until it's gone. we'll be out of debt because there'll be a line to San Francisco and back.
Yes, that's right. I mean, to your Mar-a-Lago point, I've often thought that all of this deserves a museum so people don't forget. And we'll see what the Trump Presidential Library comes up. That will be a flag waving exercise. But
what flag? Not ours. Yeah. But I mean, David, around the world, though, you've seen this. When autocrats fall, one of the things that people do to make sure they stay fallen is to take their symbols and repurpose them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yeah. And we'll just have to do some of that.
Yeah, that's right. What will happen to the MAGA hat? I mean, I'm fascinated by first the final 2 years of the Trump presidency. Let's assume Republicans lose the House and maybe cling on in the Senate. Trump does not seem like the kind of person who will be a
good sport,
be content to be a lame duck and just sort of fade quietly into the distance. And certainly to anoint a successor seems to go against the grain for him. And then where does the Republican Party go from there? Is it Vance? Is it DeSantis? Is it someone else? Is it still Trumpist? Does it sort of change direction? It's hard to read where it goes. And
I talked to old school Republicans. I mean, old school, is not that far back because that party is radicalized so fast. But Ronald Reagan era Republicans who think their party is dead and they need to create a new one. They do not believe it can be recreated in the framework. Just like people who talk about America Border Patrol think you can't recreate a border patrol on the structure of ICE. They've been so corrupted, both of them, that it's very hard to build a positive future. And so,
yeah, I mean, likewise, when I interview Republicans from the Reagan era and afterwards, I often ask that, the anti-Trumpers, I often ask them, can the clock be turned back to the Republican Party of, for example, George H.W. Bush?
Right.
And I always get pretty much the same answer as you do, that no, that has gone and there's no sort of reversing it. But then it does beg the question, do you burn it all down and start again? I think what I'm getting at here is the problem they have that it has become a cult of personality. It was a hostile takeover by Trump. It's the worship of him. It's quite literally, golden statues of Trump have been built. And that means it's very hollow ideologically. Sometimes they even openly admit it's kind of, policy is whatever Trump says.
Right.
So what therefore happens when the idol has moved on, when the cult of personalities, the personality is not there anymore, and that's a tough thing for them to rebuild. And we shall see if Democrats who are notorious for missing great opportunities, if they can seize that and use it for their own benefit.
America needs a right and a left of center party, and we don't have that in the moment. We have a left of center party and a cult of personality on the other side, aided by a Supreme Court that has bought this terrible unitary executive theory for its own reasons. So we're in a governing mess over here. Speaking of governing messes, there's this thing called FIFA. So why don't you educate us Americans about FIFA and take a minute on the World Cup?
Yeah, I mean, FIFA, the governing body of world soccer, it's decades old, and I was just at a think tank event in Washington yesterday where somebody was making the point that FIFA is actually a symbol of the old international rules-based order, this idea of all countries kind of coming together and sharing on principles, not quite on the scale of the UN, but you sort of know the point he's making. And
but they have a Peace Prize.
Sorry, yes, the Peace. Yeah, I was. I covered the draw for the World Cup, actually held at the Kennedy Center of all places, another venue that Trump has sought to take over. But of course, his name was recently removed from that. If you're looking for just signifiers that perhaps the tide is turning against Trump. But the draw, of course, FIFA presented him with a Peace Prize as a consolation for not winning the Nobel Peace Prize, and I think that also will be seen as a great metaphor for the sycophancy of FIFA just trying to flatter Trump and get on his good side. And he's had the World Cup trophy in the Oval Office and so on. And yet, despite all the allegations of corruption at FIFA and bribery and it just being very amoral, once the FIFA World Cup got underway in the US, things have gone relatively smoothly.
People have loved it. Love people who do not know that you can kick a ball at all, because you can't do that in basketball, you can't do that in baseball. They're like, wow, this is amazing.
Even though we're speaking from, I think, the two most obvious cities that missed out on hosting matches, Washington and Chicago, but yes, much of the rest of the country, or many parts, have had a great time, and I think it's been refreshing to see foreign visitors come in and say, we've heard all these terrible things about America in the Trump era, and actually we love it here. We love the size and scale and the great hospitality, and you go to a restaurant and your glass is refilled, and we love the gas stations, all the sort of quirky things on menus, and that has been the medicine that the US didn't know it needed, in terms of seeing itself through other people's eyes. They've kind of held up a mirror to America, and I think I heard one ambassador saying, we're learning about the United States here not through its leaders but through Americans, and it's a reminder that any country is a lot more and a lot bigger than just whoever happens to be the president at that moment. The US has pulled this off, and it was going especially well because Trump was distracted and doing other things. And then, of course, the inevitable happened. He finally interfered. He tried to get the suspension of an American player overturned, and that produced an outcry of favoritism. And then it didn't matter anyway, because the US lost their next match. Sadly, there will be a sting in the tail. The World Cup final is on Sunday, Argentina v Spain, and Trump will be in attendance. So we'll see if the Trump curse, which of course struck the New York Knicks when he attended their game, we'll see if that curse strikes again somehow for the final.
Well, I just speaking for myself, I have been so grateful that the rest of the world, who has a lot of reason these days to be angry with us, we talked about those, has been willing to come here and remember that our people are friends, and that our people are worth visiting, and that the country is a big and interesting place.
That's right, and that's why nothing is forever, and Trump has been hugely damaging, and the polls show that perceptions of the US have significantly declined. And I think there was a new one this week showing that maybe for the first time China is actually viewed more favorably than America, which is worrying. And yet when Trump is gone, when there's a new president, perhaps the tide can turn quickly again. We shall see. But certainly I think the World Cup was a net positive, and it was probably a truer celebration of America's 250th anniversary than the somewhat self-indulgent, grim Trump pageants that were held.
Yeah, here, certainly in DC. Yeah. I mean, I guess just to close with this, the US and Israel too has learned the same lesson. You cannot, your standing in the world suffers a lot when you confuse strategy with a target list, when you are in a tough position and your instinct is not to try and make peace. I think when you use the power you have to make peace, the world says, we like that, and it's good for you. And we did that, and Donald Trump blew up USAID right away and let people die all over the world. That does not endear you around the world, for sure.
Yeah, and I think not for the first time, Trump is more extreme, but he's also not necessarily a break from some of the things that have gone before, thinking back to the Vietnam War and in my lifetime, the Iraq War. These damaged perceptions of the US as well. Trump, of course, promised no more wars, and he still loves to say he's ended sort of 8 or 9 of them and would end the Ukraine war in day one. But one of the reasons the voters are turning against him and his approval rating is an all-time low is not only did he promise to lower prices, but they've gone up, but he promised no more wars, and he's launched a major one in Iran with no end in sight, and that's damaging to him. and the United States. And yes, you mentioned Israel. That's another interesting example, I think, of the dynamic where in the US especially, and in certain other quarters, questioning support for Israel was once almost taboo. It was just a given. This week, House Democrats were pretty divided over military aid to Israel. I mean, that would once have been unimaginable. And in that sense, Benjamin Netanyahu parallels Donald Trump as a figure so extreme, so beyond the norms that he's made people wake up and realize and finally push back. And so there's a lot of lessons there.
Yeah, history is full of leaders who are dead ends. And if we're lucky, we figure out a way to move on in a different direction before we actually hit that dead end. David, your reporting is great. The Guardian is great. Tell everybody where they can find it and how they can contribute to it.
Well, thank you. And yeah, if I may do a plug, the Guardian is a 205-year-old newspaper from Britain, but now a major player in the United States. We have 200 staff here, and we like to note often more readers on any given day than even the Washington Post and Wall Street Journal. It's at theguardian.com. And when you go to that site, it's pretty easy to see a little tab where you're very welcome to volunteer a donation of however much or little you like, which certainly, yes, helps us do our journalism.
Thank you so much. I really appreciated this. I hope we can do it again.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.